to facilitate a conversation that talks about children suddenly becomes maybe a difficult thing, and yet I'm a proud citizen of Glendora, much like you. And so we understand the type of wisdom that we have in the room, the love of parents that we have in the room, and so it really is an honor to stand here as we walk a pathway forward. I want to address a couple of ground rules real quick, and then we'll get going. If you happen to need to use the restroom, it happens, out these doors, down the stairs, please do me a favor. Don't go outside. You won't be able to get back inside unless you walk all the way around the building, back up the stairs and through the doors, and then everybody's going to know what happened. Okay, so let's not do that. Second thing, if you could be kind enough, please don't put it on vibrate. We don't want it to ring, ding, buzz, dong, none of that. Just put that thing in airplane mode, turn it off. Everything's going to be okay for 90 minutes. If it wasn't, you wouldn't be here. So let's go ahead and turn those phones off. Finally, let's have a conversation really quick. I love the fact that Glendora calls ourselves Pride of the Foothills. I really do. Maybe that's ego and flesh, I don't know, but I like it. And so if we're going to call ourselves the Pride of the Foothills, then tonight we get an opportunity to earn that title. How we conduct ourselves tonight matters. Other people across the state, other cities, other towns, other school districts, people watch, people hear, you know, you've been listening, otherwise you might not have been here. And so let us carry ourselves well tonight. We have children in attendance this evening, so let's honor them, right? We're having a conversation about parents' rights. So maybe we honor the parents that brought their children and we behave accordingly. I love civic discourse. I love difficult conversations. I think the more difficult, the better. I think the more heated, the better, because in that heat and in that open exchange of ideas, what used to happen was goodness came out of that. Not necessarily compromise, but the clinking of that used to bring the best ideas of people. And so let's do that tonight. I don't care what aisle you sit on, not even tonight. It doesn't matter where you sit down the aisle. That's not the point of tonight. Tonight is to listen to people that are subject matter experts, to hear their opinions, to let them bring you up to date with what's going on, and then ask questions to receive. I will tell you, as much as I love open debate and difficult conversations, yelling, screaming, general insults, slander, they have no place here. And so we'll just stop what we're doing, and we'll decide to either end the event or just ask you to leave. That choice will be up to you. I don't think we're going to have any problems at all. I don't. I'm looking around the room. I see beautiful, smiling, reasonable faces looking back at me, and I have a feeling it's going to carry on for the rest of the evening. So, before we get started, who am I and why did I get here? It's a great question. My name is Ryan Otteson. I'm just a citizen of Glendora. I happen to serve as the chair of the Legislative Action Committee for the Glendora Chamber of Commerce, who, by the way, has nothing to do with this. They're not a sponsor. They're no way at all affiliated with it. It's just something that I happen to do. So if some of you guys recognize it and go, he's a chamber guy, he is. Chamber's got nothing to do with this. Somebody just called and said, hey, we heard that you did a pretty good job moderating other things. Would you be interested in doing this? I love civic discourse. Of course, I'd be happy to do this. There may or may not be uncomfortable conversations. I love that. Of course, let's do this. So, without any further introduction or wasting of your time, it is my honor to introduce our first presenter this evening, and I will read because the man's put in the effort to earn the bio, so let's do that. Our first presenter tonight is Lance Christensen. He brings 2 decades of public policy and political experience to the California Policy Center, where he serves as the Vice President of Education, Policy, and Government Affairs. He was also one of the principal architects of the recent School Choice Initiative proposal in California and candidate for California Superintendent of Public Instruction on the November 2022 statewide ballot. Before his tenure at CPC, he worked as a legislative consultant in the California State Senate and as a finance budget analyst at the Department of Finance. More recently, he served as Chief of Staff and Senior Policy Advisor to former California State Senator John Morlock. He was also the inaugural director of Reason Foundation's Pension Reform Project, setting the stage for major reforms in state and local retirement programs across the country. Christensen's research and commentary on education issues and state and municipal fiscal policy is regularly published in national and local publications, and he appears frequently on radio, television, and podcasts. Christensen earned his bachelor's degree in English from Brigham Young University and a master's degree from Pepperdine University School of Public Policy, specializing in international relations. Based in Northern California and frequently working in Sacramento and Orange County, Christensen is fully engaged in his community, coaching any number of youth leagues, sitting on various boards, and serving in lay positions in his church. He is happily married. He is a happily married father of 5 children, all of whom are 7th generation Californians. Before we bring up Lance with an amazing Glendora round of applause, please hold all of your questions till the end. We're going to go through both speakers, and then we'll take some questions. So if you need to scribble them down, you need to pull your phone out, take a note, feel free to do that. And while we get ready, ladies and gentlemen, please give an amazing Glendora round of applause for Lance Christensen.
It's good to see so many of you here. I'm a pacer, so I can stand over there. He's a pacer too, so we'll go back and forth. Thank you for coming tonight. As he said, I am a father of 5 kids. My oldest is 19, went through the public school system. My youngest is 7. They've all gone through the public school system. We had a small tenure during COVID where my children were homeschooled through a charter. It's an amazing process to be a father. And I know that the effort and work that you put in as fathers and mothers is important. We're here tonight because in California, if you pay attention to the legislature at all, you'll know that parental rights are under assault. But I want to talk a little bit about who I am. Is the PowerPoint ready to go?
Yep. So you do, let's hit the clicker. Up right here.
Oh, gotcha.
Right there.
So a little bit more about me, just so you understand. California Policy Center is a 501c3 that has 3 major projects in it. One is called the Parent Union, which is part of the reason I'm here tonight. One is called our California Local Elected Officials, and one is called the Janus Project. Each one of these has a distinct flavor to it, and I'll go through some of that tonight, but one of the things I want you to notice is that when parents stand up, they're heard. Sometimes not as quickly as you want to be heard, but you're heard. So I've done a few writings. This is a piece I did a couple years ago in the Register. I did one here in a National Review. The governor's really having a hard time making decisions about the budget. Then we had the Sacramento Bee when they were attacking legislatures going after the charters. If you remember during the COVID pandemic, they were nervous that if you closed all the schools down, the kids wouldn't come back. And so they reduced all the allocations for funding the charter schools dramatically. They capped everything, and SB 98 was a budget bill. And it really forced parents into some very difficult conversations, including my wife and I. State of California education, we're in a really big challenge here. And you know some of these facts. This year, the legislature spent $128.6 billion on K through 12 education. That's just under $23,000 per kid. It's a lot of money. So just take an average size classroom in California, the average number is 25. That's around $600,000 per kid, or per classroom, excuse me. But we're ranked at the bottom on literacy. Now this number just improved recently. It's up to 49, and it changed by slide, but it's still abysmal. California spending that kind of money should be breeding rocket scientists, not 50th in literacy. We also have a problem too because parents are voting with their feet. And you can raise your hand if you have no friends that haven't left in the last couple years, right? I've had hundreds of friends leave, not dozens, hundreds, and it's heartbreaking. And so 310,000 people left the school. The way I got introduced to Glendora was through Judy Nelson, where I came up here and I spoke several months ago. I made a tour through California, so I lost the election last year and I said, okay, what am I gonna do about this? I can take my marbles and go home, or I can take all the things I learned and travel the state and have a conversation. So I did. These are the 13 cities I went to, all the way from Redding at the top, San Diego at the bottom, Copperopolis, you know where Copperopolis is? Copperopolis all the way over to Arroyo Grande, Bakersfield, Sacramento, because I wanted to have real, honest conversations about what's happening in the state of California. And if any of you were at that meeting, and a few of you were, I recognize a few faces, good to see you. We just threw everything on the table. I've got those notes that I've been working on trying to put together a policy proposal because I think that When you have a large-scale focus group, when you have citizens come together in this sort of engagement, you can share ideas that you can't otherwise. And so between those discussions, those 13 discussions, I'm putting together a plan that I think we can get behind both at a state level, at a regional county level, at a school district level, and at a school site level. Some will be structural, some will be things around the edges, but I want you to pay attention to this. And if you're interested in being a part of this implementation, I'm developing a task force. You're welcome to join through the California Policy Center, and I'm happy to sign you up. I love what Madison says, right? The guy that writes the Constitution. I know no safe depository of the ultimate powers of society, but the people themselves. And if we think they're not enlightened enough to exercise their control of the wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform them, right? That's what we do here tonight, these kinds of civic engagements. Constitution of the State of California, who's read it? Okay, 5, 6 people. Okay, who's read the United States Constitution? Raise your hand. Okay, I expect you to go home tonight and read the California State Constitution. Take about a half hour, okay? It's thick, it's heavy. Who's read the Education Code? Raise your hand. All the way through?
Yes. Tabbed and everything.
You're amazing, I want your card. You have two?
I have her info.
Okay, we're up to 3. I have literally talked to over 100,000 people. 1, 2, and 1 other lady. I've read the whole Education Code. Is it a fun read? Miserable, miserable. But the California State Constitution was adopted in 1849. It was also re-upped in 1879. This is a copy of what happened in Michigan. It says up here in Article 9, which is the education section, right? Education, a general diffusion of knowledge and intelligence being essential to the preservation of rights of the people, the legislature shall, not may, shall, encourage by all suitable means the promotion of intellectual, scientific, moral, and agricultural improvement. Do you think those things are happening right now? Okay, this is the mandate in the state constitution. Not happening, okay? Let's go to Article 9, Section 5, a few sections down. This is the mandate that all public schools should be created and open and be free. There's a Supreme Court case, it's called the Vergara decision a few years ago. Some students sued the state of California because they said, we're not getting a high quality public education. It's free, yes, but it's not worth its weight in gold. You know what the Supreme Court said? You're right, and because the Constitution doesn't guarantee you a high quality public education, it can be free, but that's all that matters. No wonder parents are leaving with their feet. 310 in the last 3 years, right? It's a big deal. I'm sorry, I'll go back. Section 14. Now, we wonder who has the power in the state of California. And this is a whole hour-long conversation. But the Constitution gives it to school boards and allows the legislature to form the school boards, to give some input, but in the end, school boards are duly elected and sovereign to the people. If you're a school board member, I would argue you're the most powerful person in your community. More powerful than a congressman, more powerful than a lot of supervisors. The school board runs the community, whether or not you have kids in the school district or not. So this is very important to know. Education policy is a lot of things, right? If you want to discuss how we get to curricula, you have to understand the process. So we saw in the Constitution that the legislature has a vote in this. They will establish what they want the guidelines to be, the standards to be. When they do that, the government will sign the bill, go through the State Board of Education, will create what we call a framework, something to build upon. And then at that point in time, they will send it down to the districts. Well, a lot of people will say, okay, the legislature told us what to do. The state board just gave us a whole standard or framework, not the standard, the framework. We have to do what they tell us. Wrong. Right? Education code, okay? It's very simple. The boards have that distinction. So when you talk about implementation, it really comes down to the school sites and the board. So if people tell you, well, the state told us we had to do this, I will promise you that most of the time, they're wrong. Now, who has the power of the purse? The legislature does, obviously. If they pass a budget that's $127 billion, then they can pull some strings. But they can't just take the money from you. There's lots of laws in Supreme Court jurisprudence on this. So, One of the bills that was created this year, I'm not going to talk about all these bills. Jennifer's going to spend a few minutes on something else, some other bills. But this is one that's important. Anybody heard of AB 1314? So, one of our friends, Aaron Friday, came to me last year and said, Lance, we got to do something about these kids that are going through a really difficult time in their lives. How on earth can we make sure that parents are notified when they want to make transitions? So I said, let's write a bill. We did. So we worked on this with other people. We put together, and Assemblyman Bill Staley, who's from Riverside, not far from here, said, I will introduce the bill. So he did. It became AB 1314. And when he introduced the bill, most bills will go through it's a pretty procedural process. Again, I spent 20 years in the legislature. This is not rocket science. The bill gets referred to a committee, it goes to the committee, the chair will set a date, he'll confirm with the author, they'll hear the bill in committee, people will come and testify for and behalf of it, then they'll vote, and if it gets out of that committee, it will go to the next committee. If it doesn't have another committee, it will go to the floor, right? This is very basic how a bill becomes law, right? School Rock, you've all seen the movie. The problem was, the chair of the Assembly Education Committee, Almer Suchi, from LA, said, no, we're not gonna hear the bill. Made a big to-do about it. Again, in the legislature, it's custom and practice of the houses that you hear every bill that's presented. It's not the same in Congress. There's 435 of them. They write bills all the time, right? I wrote a bill on whatever. That's not how the legislature works. In the legislature, if you're an assembly member, which there's 80 of them, you can write 50 bills in 2 years. If you're in the Senate, there's 40 of them. You can write 40 bills in 2 years. That's a lot of legislation. Just do the math. That's thousands of bills that a committee would have to hear. So I understand why they would say, no, we don't want to hear it, but a lot of bills actually, once they're drafted, don't even go in our hearing committee. They're drafted for different political reasons. But this bill was not. This bill was meant to be a serious policy. Now, again, if the committee doesn't want to hear the bill, just vote no, right? Then it's done. But what happens when it goes through that process? People are on the record. They don't want to be on the record. So instead, they yanked the bill. Bill Staley called me while I was at Legal Land with my family during spring break, and he said, what are we going to do? And as my kids are ramming cars into each other, I said, I have an idea. Let's do this as a policy per school district. So what you've just seen Chino Valley, Marietta do, we helped write that. That was a basis of 1314. And the idea is starting to, matriculate. We got Temecula took it up this week. Anderson, which is up in Shasta County, north part of the state, they just took it up and passed it. We have other school districts that are thinking about it, and there's a lot of nervous people. There's a lot of people that don't want the parents to be in charge. There's a lot of people that want to advocate for what the state superintendent of public instruction says on his website. If you go to his website, you go to AB1076 FAQs, number 8. Question number 8, he says on there, if a teacher feels conflicted about something, they should lie to the parents and create a false record.
That's wrong.
Just check it. Google it right now. This is crazy. This is a state website.
Wow.
The policy of the State Department of Education is to lie to parents. I thought honesty was always the best policy. So parental notification, if you have a bad parent who's a terrible person, well, teachers are already mandated reporters. If there's abuse, neglect, or other things in the home, they have a right, if not a duty, to report that stuff. If it doesn't rise to that level, then the teacher really shouldn't feel like it's their right or responsibility to withhold that information from parents. So, there are many more school districts that are thinking about this. We're helping them out, go through this process, and think about which way to deal with it. Okay. A lot of people are concerned too because they don't know, how do I do? How do I get involved? How can I really be a part of this conversation? I'm too scared. I'm nervous. I don't want my kids to be intimidated. I don't want them to be threatened. I don't want weird things to happen. I don't want to lose my business. Right? These issues are icky. It's cultural. It's religious. I don't want to be a cultural warrior. Separation of church and state. Right? You hear that stuff. Except for a lot of these issues really are very standard, but nobody actually reads the agendas. Who has read a school board agenda in the last 2 months? Raise your hand. Wow. It's blowing my mind tonight. You're breaking the curve, seriously. Can we send her out, please? Let's go her out. Good for you, right? Good for you, because that's not an easy thing to do. A lot of those agendas are written so you won't read them on purpose, okay? So these are issues you should be asking questions about. Over the last 3 years, we had hundreds of billions of dollars going to our public school system from the federal government as a part of all the COVID packages. What's happening to that money? Where's it going? Do the audits, right? So there are a lot of questions to ask there. What about teachers? We hear we're having a teacher shortage in the United States. It's a problem. If it's a problem, how are we going to address it, right? Here's some more topics to think about. What about school choice? What about the 21st century economy? If you're a business leader in this state, it behooves you to have an education system by which kids can learn how to do math and read basic things, to transact business. If you're building things, they have to read a plan, right? If they're calculating money, they have to know an account. But we have found out something. I was on a flight home with the legislator today, and there were three members of the Board of Education, State Board of Education, being approved by the Senate today. All three of them voted for a math curriculum this last month that is a complete failure. 1,200 of California's top academics, including Nobel laureates and deans of math schools at our universities, have said this is a complete abomination. Stop and start over. They didn't, they ignored it and they went on. So if you're in a school that doesn't offer algebra in 8th grade or other things, you can blame that curriculum. I put this in kind of an order. It's not really a specific order, but in every area there's a certain kind of rollout of constituencies. I think what happens a lot of times is we take the administrators and the academics and we put them at the top, right? They're credentialed, they know things. They're the smartest people, they study these things. But really, it's parents, children, and communities. It's you. And if you're part of these constituencies, you have every right to ask your question. Okay. I don't believe in solutions. I'm one of these Thomas Sowell economist guys. You heard Thomas Sowell, he says, there are no solutions, there's only alternatives. Give and take. So we can't have the perfect of everything, but we should be able to have alternatives for our kids and our educations that work, that we can agree on as a community, and it doesn't have to be partisan or ideological. Do you want to know how to do math and read? This is fundamental. Who's read Sold the Story or heard Sold the Story, the podcast? Oh, geez. Hey, no? Okay, Sold the Story by Emily Hanford. Write it down, Sold the Story. She is a national reporter who's been doing education policy for like 25 years, and she's gone through and discussed the failure of our literacy education in the state of California and in the nation. And it's heartbreaking because we continue down a path that doesn't work. They have this thing called the science of reading. Phonics, phonemes, sounding out words, right? That works. But for years, and it's still the policy of the state of California, we're doing this cueing mechanism. Look at a word, think about it, right? It's kind of Music Man. See Music Man? I saw that the other day. I used to love that movie. And then I watched it, think about Emily Hanford. I was like, oh, that's terrible, right? Think the song and then you can play it. I took piano lessons. It doesn't work that way, right? Okay, so when you think about broad alternatives, we need to ask challenging questions. I appreciate what we said at the beginning, right? This should be hard. Also, think about the impacts of policy prescriptions. You can have the best and most well-intended policy in the world. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If you're in business and you're trying to sell something, a product or a service, and it's not being bought, you change course. Public policy goes a little bit slower, right? It's a deliberative process on purpose. I'm also a believer that we shouldn't have straw man arguments. Steal your conversation, steal your stuff. If you're an advocate, you should know all your stats and where everything comes from. You should have a basis for your argument that doesn't take away the emotional side. That should all be there, right? But you should have something to hold on to. The ethos, the pathos, and the logos, right? The three elements of a great discussion. Most of the time, parents go straight either for that emotional argument or they go straight to the logical. They forget the credibility. You gotta have a credible argument. And the last one too is not everything can be fixed overnight, so it takes time. I was in grad school at Pepperdine, and my professor was Bruce Hershenson, and he was a wonderful man. And he said to me, really there's three ways, let me step back. He said to me, Lance, I know you think about getting a PhD. I thought letters would make me smarter. He said, don't let school get in the way of your education. I had to think about that a little bit. So life of hard knocks, street smarts is a real thing. I come from a family of farmers. My dad was a farmer, 1,800 acres up in southern Idaho. My mom was a dairy farmer, 200 head of cattle. You want to talk about hard work? That's hard work. Then I had another professor, Gordon Lloyd, who said, if you want to think about policy making in the state or anywhere, this is how you should do it. So when I was in the legislature, people come and say, hey, Lance, I have a really good idea for a bill. I say, okay, well, what's the bill? They tell me the issue, and I say, okay, should government do that thing? Once they answer that question, was it affirmative? Yes. Then I'd say, okay, if they should be doing that, what level should do that? Federal, state, local, school board? Once we answer that question, I said, okay, then how much should the government do of that thing? 100%, 70%, 50%, 5%, 1%? We don't ask these questions hard enough or often enough. Just because a government can do something doesn't mean it should. Addressing common objections, again, we need to steal our arguments. Make sure that we have things that are thoughtful and helpful. You have to push back against a lot of different forces there. In California, the most powerful constituency that we do have, politically speaking, is the California Teachers Association. We have 319,000 public school teachers in the state of California. Many of you are probably in this room. I love teachers. I taught fourth grade. Fantastic. Great opportunity. I'm not a fan of the union. Because what happens is it becomes a very political thing. You can see here, this is the former president of UTLA. She said the quiet part out loud. They own the people who make the decisions and write the checks. So if you have that kind of power, are you going to be able to make changes or reforms? I would argue you don't. In 2019, the United States Supreme Court declared the Janus decision, which said that if you work for a government entity, you do not have to belong to a union. A lot of people have said, okay, I'm gonna take my money, my $1,000 a year and go somewhere else. We're watching what's happening as people decide they're gonna check out and go a different direction. Sir Ken Robinson, he did a great TED Talk. If you Google him sometime, watch his TED Talk. It's about the conveyor belt of education. He says this. He says, we have sold ourselves into a fast food model of education. It's impoverishing our spirit and our energies as much as fast food is depleting our physical bodies. Go to your schools. See what's being taught there. And again, a lot of great teachers. I'm not here to demean the teachers. They're incredible. We have to have a system that works better. Sometimes we have to think and act anew. That's part of my goal here, is to engage citizens just like you to make sure that we can go through a process that's thoughtful, that's considerate. We're not all the same. My wife doesn't even agree with me 100% of the time. This is shocking, I know. From time to time, we have disagreements. When I mean time to time, like every half hour. But I love her passionately. She's amazing. Because I know that she and I both have the best intention for our children. We may see different ways about getting to that goal. I'm about to wrap up to pass on here, but if you want to be a part of this process, you're welcome to join my Red Team Task Force. You can take a picture of that now, or you can grab one of the cards in the back. I brought a couple things, I just really quick, and then I'll turn it over here. That's my information. I mean, if you really hate me, you can call me at 2 o'clock this morning. Just be prepared, I'll answer your phone call. And we'll have the conversation. We have some cards in back. My friend and colleague, Mary Barkey, was the president of Orange County Board of Education. She and I work on a project called Cleo, like I was telling you about. And if you want to get involved in what we're doing, we have an action network. We're a 501c3, so we don't take any government money. If you want to donate, be a part of that, that's great. And if you're thinking about running for office, we have created also what we call our candidate academy. This is a handbook. It's the soup to nuts of running for office. Everything you possibly want to know in the known universe is in this handbook. It's amazing. The authors are amazing. Seriously, folks, we need people to be engaged, and you don't have to run for office. But you have to support the people who do. And when they win, you can't go home and say, Susie's got it taken care of, right? You have to be there and support them every step of the way. And it's a long battle. And our kids are worth it. And believe me, when your kids are out of the house, it's not over. Because if the schools don't work, truancy's up, joblessness is up, the economy doesn't work, property values go down, you have all sorts of problems. We mitigate that by having really good public schools. So I look forward to the conversation. If you have more questions, Jennifer will be happy to answer.
See, you thought I was kidding about Pride of the Foothills, and then he's asking questions, and you're out here raising your hands like, yeah, we're informed. So,
Oh, not so fast. Come on back up.
sir, so hang tight. We're
You
gonna.
said we could ask questions. when
Yeah.
it's done.
So no. I said, well,
Both of them are done.
I got you, Mike. Yeah. When everybody's done, we'll get all the questions at the end. Yeah. No worries. No worries. They are passionate too, sir. It's a good thing.
This is my last meeting. I'm ready for it.
All right, love that. Hey, so this is what it's going to look like. We're going to bring up our next speaker, Lance. You did a great job. Thank you. I think what I liked most about that was not even policy, but functionality. Right? Hey, here's the field. Here's what it looks like. Here's how things go from A to B. We can figure out the meat and potatoes in there and look at that along the way. So I love that. Our next presenter is Jennifer Kennedy. She is a Southern California native and an attorney. She's a civil litigator who became an overnight activist for parents' rights and health freedom back in 2016 when the state took away personal beliefs exemptions for the childhood vaccine schedule. In 2021, Jennifer began fighting the COVID vaccine mandates against K-12 school children in LA Unified, and is now suing Granada Hills Charter for religious discrimination with its vax mandate. Jennifer has now taken on the gender ideology being pushed on our children by our legislature. You can hear her on the radio on Saturday nights discussing law and legislation as the legal eagle of the Los Angeles Hispanic Republican Club Show on KRLA AM 870. I feel like I need to say that a little better. On KRLA AM 870 from 8 to 10 a.m. That sounded better, didn't it? Yeah. All right. Jennifer's mission is to inform and to empower fellow citizens to get engaged and to rise up to reclaim this state. My fellow citizens, let's welcome Jennifer Kennedy.
Do you have enough sound? Give me a 1, 2, 3. Hi, everybody. Everybody hear me? Yes. Got 1, 2, 3. Okay, great. Thank you all so much for being here on a Thursday night. I understand there are open houses in the area, and so there might have been a conflict, but it's great to see all of you here. And I'm trying to decide whether to lose the glasses. Can I still read if I lose the glasses? Let's see. We'll give it a try. Thank you, Lance, for an awesome overview of our educational system and what's happening in California. And my hope here tonight is to bring it down to the level of what is happening in our schools with regard to legislation that we've been hearing a lot about, and also with regard to the parental notification policies that Lance mentioned that are a direct result of what's happening in our schools with transgenderism and the transgender ideology. It's a lot to cover, so I have a lot to say, and I hope I can get to all of it. First of all, Mike asked me to kind of talk about the general sentiment of California legislators and their perspective on parental rights. And the general sentiment is that we have none, and that the state is here to take control of our children. And in fact, as we've seen in the raft of bills that have come out recently, the state wants control of our children earlier and earlier and earlier. And what we're seeing from these bills that seek to lower the age of consent for almost everything, it's as if the state of California thinks that at the age of 12, our job as parents is over. And that at the age of 12, our children should be allowed to do almost anything. They've been granted the decision-making rights to get abortions. They've been granted the right to go get their own vaccines, which are HPV and Hep B. Those are the only two, remember, that children can consent to in the state of California. They cannot consent to anything else. Don't let anyone tell you that. And recently, they can consent to a raft of sensitive services, and this involves sexually transmitted disease prevention and treatment, and also what they call gender-affirming care, which can mean puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, etc. And children can then seal their medical records when receiving those services as against their own parents, and insurance companies are prohibited from revealing that to the parents. So see what they're doing? They're just they're emancipating our children in every possible incremental way. And we have seen that very visibly this session in particular. Last legislative session seemed to be all about COVID legislation, trying to push the COVID shots on everybody, trying to make employers be the COVID police. It was very COVID-centric. This year, it's parents' rights centric, and specifically beating parents' rights. So let's talk a little bit about also the way our legislators, this is my opinion, the way our legislators view their constituents, and that is, they don't really care about them either, because the legislation you see is special interest driven, it is personal interest driven, where you can't imagine that someone's constituents, for example, are clamoring to have a COVID mandate for the shot for school children. Who's asking for that? Well, only Senator Richard Pan was. And when he tried to do that, everybody rose up and that was defeated quite quickly. But who's asking for that? Only the radical left agenda in Sacramento, and only, it's like they hand out little assignments to the legislators to throw these bills out there because the machine wants them, not because the people they work for want them. So that's another thing to keep in mind, that we just see this over and over. I keep wondering, why on earth did you propose that bill in particular? Well, it's because they've been given that assignment. I believe that to be true. We saw that, for example, with AB659. Okay, AB659, you might remember, it's still live. It's the HPV mandate, right? Cecilia Aguiar Curry has a personal reason for wanting everyone in the state to get the HPV vaccine. She had a couple of relatives in her family die, or friends or relatives die of cervical cancer. She has a deeply personal reason for pushing this legislation. But that meant that she introduced a bill to mandate that at the time it came out, that every 8th grader had to get the HPV shot in order to continue to go to school, right? I never want to see another single legislator come out with a vaccine mandate ever again. And here's the power of grassroots activism. And I'll jump to this one as an example because we want to talk about successes, and the successes of people in this room, the successes of grassroots advocacy. It actually works. Because when that mandate came out, you have to know, Cecilia Aguiar Curry has been planning this for 5 years. This HPV bill, she was waiting for the right time. She finally rolled it out, and that thing hit, and the parent world went nuts. And that became the focus of defeating that 8th grade mandate. And with immediate public blowback, she amended it. Super exciting. She took out that 8th grade mandate, but guess what she did? She put in a college mandate. That now suddenly we're going to move the HPV shot requirement to everyone going to college in the state of California. This includes adults, so this is ridiculous. And we said, no, that's not what we meant. We meant no mandate whatsoever. And again, the pressure was so great, the engagement at the Capitol was so great, she took that mandate out. And now, here's where 659 is. It turned into her request that all the schools send out letters to families that, as a matter of public policy, the HPV shot is, her first words were, expected. You're expected to get the HPV shot to go on to 8th grade or to go to college. And we pushed back again and said the word expected is going to confuse people. It's going to mislead our English as a second language learners, families. It's wrong. You gotta change that word. And she did. And so now the word is recommended. But still, I contend this is ridiculous. So now we've gone from an 8th grade HPV shot mandate all the way down to somebody's got to send a letter that indicates that the state thinks it's a good idea, a recommendation that you get this shot. So just the other day, up in Sacramento's, AB659 has made it through to Assembly Appropriations. Appropriations is the committee that looks at the fiscal effect of these bills. And so I hopped up to oppose to say, this is a stupid waste of money because you're going to have the state churn out reams, paper, postage, to send a letter to basically say, we recommend you do this thing we think is good. Why don't you just tell us all to eat broccoli and get a good diet and exercise and do other good things? What a waste of our resources. And I was really happy to hear, after I said that to the committee, that the finance person stated that even the finance department is now against AB659. Because it's a waste of money. And there's another portion of 659 which actually forces insurers to cover it for free, to offer that shot for free. So there's a financial problem here. Anyway, that is a success story of how relentless grassroots advocacy has succeeded in stopping that. And so these people here, you all here, this is how we get things done. The things that we need to be looking at right now, the ones that affect our school boards and directly affect education, I'm sure you all know AB1078. That's the state control of curriculum. And we've all seen the big fight in the news recently with Temecula, in particular, objected to one module in the state recommended curriculum, and that module was about hearty milk. And within that module, there were discussions of things that the Temecula Valley Board felt was inappropriate for who? K-5 kids. This is not high school, their district, they were talking about K-5 education and why our little children, why do they need to be introduced to the Gay Liberation Front? Why? Why is that an important module? Why is that going to help kids thrive, as Newsom and Thurman keep saying? So they initially rejected that curriculum, and that's when Newsom sails out on social media and threatens them with fines, with audits, and threatens them. It was a fantastic real-world display of what AB 1078 will do to local school boards. And that is, number one, they say, oh, go ahead and choose your own curriculum. But if we don't like it, we're going to go out and buy it for you and push it in your schools and then charge you for it. We'll buy it for you and we'll call it a loan, but we're charging you for that. Number two, we are going to, if you have school board members who opt for a different curriculum that we don't think is inclusive and diverse enough, we're going to dox those board members. We will publicly tar and feather them and shame them and publish their names, etc. And also, we're going to change the uniform complaint procedure so that you don't have any local control over these grievances, but they can tattle straight to the superintendent. And the superintendent can come down like Big Daddy and punish these school board members. So what is that? That's basically voter nullification. When you work so hard to run candidates and you flip that school board, and then you have the state coming down saying, no, sorry, we're just gonna veto what you've done. That's exactly what 1078 seeks to do. That bill is live. Recently, again, it was in appropriations. Oh, and Lance, we were gonna talk about the suspense file. Maybe we will. In appropriations, so AB 1078 moved through appropriations and it was sent to what's called the suspense file. That doesn't mean it's suspended, tabled, or shelved. The suspense file is an old, antiquated process by which hundreds of bills are moved without any further discussion. It is not a hearing, it is a hog auction at the county fair. And they are moving through numbers of bills and you only kind of find out what lives and dies at the end of the day. And so what happens in the interim, my understanding is, now that a bill has fiscal impact and it's been moved into suspense, behind the scenes, the legislators are still, they're working with the money holders in the Senate appropriations to say, please budget my bill, please budget it. So we have a chance to kill it, still. This is why we still contact our legislators and say, AB 1078 in particular, extreme fiscal impact. You're gonna come in and replace entire curriculums, super expensive. You're going to expose yourself to lawsuits for usurping local control, super expensive. Kill that bill. So we want to kill AB 1078. The next bill I want you to be aware of is AB5. Who's aware of AB5? That is the indoctrination of our teachers. Once again, it wants to provide even more training in the LGBTQ world. And this is how to greater support LGBT kids, how to greater include that in your lessons. But worst of all is how to profile non-LGBT affirming parents. How to look through your community of kids and decide which parents need to be indoctrinated a little more, or which student might need more help because they are LGBTQ. It's invasive, it's also expensive. Why are we wasting time on this type of teacher training when we need to get back to the basics and back to academics and increasing our teachers' teaching ability to get our kids up to standards? AB5 is also sitting in suspense, I believe. The last one, this is a great one because I have breaking news on this one. SB 596. This is the Parent Silencing Bill by Anthony Portantino. This is the one that wants to fine and imprison parents who harass and annoy school officials outside of school, but at other places, such as school board meetings. This is specifically designed to chill the free speech of parents. And it's a $1,000 fine, and it's time in jail, and it's extremely vague about annoying and harassing. But guess what? Breaking news, that one's sitting in suspense also. And that's gonna draw lawsuits, and that's why it's fiscally bad. Interestingly, I just got a text from Nicole Pearson tonight to say that a new body, a new entity has weighed in opposing SB 596, and it's the ACLU. Right? What happened there? But you know what? Get this. This is what they said. This is what's crazy, and it's fantastic because you know the ACLU, they love the radical left now, but it says this bill is opposed unless amended because existing law adequately serves the goal of protecting school staff from attacks. Right, no duh. ACLU also states concerns with the bill's expansion to specify that disorder in a local education association meeting might have First Amendment implications also. Yes, no brainer. And also, how is this bill going to affect parents and students of color whom ACLU believes might be targeted by this bill? Oh, that sound you just heard was the death of SB 596. Right there. I'm telling you. That's exciting. That's just happening. There you go. And strangely, Assembly Appropriations suspense file. It has a problem about the costs for incarcerating the violators. Anyway, super exciting. The suspense file is going to be heard on September 1. So we have a lot of other bills in suspense and still a lot of time before October 14th when the governor is going to be signing off on these things to continue to advocate. We are not done yet. So those are the three bills that touch the school board situation. But the other big thing we have to talk about right now, and I want to also talk about, oh my gosh, there's so many others. Okay, is transgender, is the gender. How am I doing on time? Good. Doing okay? Okay. Remind me at the end, there's two other bills that need discussion. And those those touch our kids. They are the most devastating bills against California parents that I can remember in my short time, my 7 years of legislative watching, and they are AB957 and AB665. Who's aware of those? Okay, a goodly number, but I need to tell you what they are. AB957 is the bill that seeks to amend our family code to add into the family code the statement that affirmation of child gender transition, affirmation of a child's gender transition, is part of a child's health, safety, and welfare. Health, safety, and welfare are the magic buzzwords in the family code and throughout almost every other code. They are magic words, and when you tie affirmation of gender transition into that, you're opening the door for non-affirming parents, number one, to be deemed abusive, unsafe, bad for the welfare of their child. And this is exactly how parents, loving and fit parents, who do not embrace gender ideology, or frankly, who do not affirm in that moment, they're gonna lose custody. They will lose custody, they will lose visitation, and AB 957 is going to devastate families. The judicial preference for affirming parents right now is already happening. I am telling you this as an attorney and with experience with my other family law friends. What we are seeing now, used to be in California, if you were the mom controlled. Mom almost always mom had the deference, right? Now it's the affirming parent who's getting the deference by the judges. And we know two fathers who have had their children taken from them because they refuse to treat their little boys as girls, and the spouse or the ex is trying to transition them. And this is wrong, of course. 957 seeks as a matter of law to make affirmation the law of the land in this state. And it will go elsewhere. You know the adage, so California goes, so goes the nation. That is what they're hoping to do. Now, this bill has been amended so many times already because of the blowback, and I personally think it is so fatally flawed that it cannot win. We have religious lawsuits ready to drop if it is to pass. They know that. We know that the questions that the legislators raised to the author were never answered in a hearing at all. And I'm not sure why they continue. I think it's an ego thing that they continue to push it. My new call for this bill is to kill it, and for the author to pull it. They've done a funny little thing though. They have now attached another bill, AB559, to it. AB599, it hits the family code elsewhere, and it talks about visitation, and I have a feeling that they are tying these two together so that when they don't pass AB599, it's like, oops, oh well, so 957 can't pass at this time. And they get to avoid the shame, or they get to save face by not having to stand down on 957. That's technicalities. I don't know if that's going to work. It is still worth telling your legislators you have to oppose this, because 957 still needs to make it through a couple more vote hurdles, and their time is running out. 665. 665 is what we call state sanctioned kidnapping. This is also the second worst bill ever, and they have peddled this bill. This is what you have to know. They've peddled the bill as if it is, they will say this, aligning two codes to allow children on Medi-Cal to receive mental health counseling without parental notice, because kids on private pay insurance already get to self-consent without parental notice to mental health counseling. Think school counselors on campus, right? And so they're saying, it's strange that kids on Medi-Cal can't go get mental health counseling and kids with private pay can without parental notice. So we need to mesh these two and make these work so that Medi-Cal kids can, Medi-Cal can fund this. The only problem is, we figured this out a long time ago, that if they really wanted Medi-Cal funds, they just need to go get them. They need to go to the Welfare Institutions Code, which talks about funding for children's mental health, and they need to change a word, and the word is not. There's a code that says Medi-Cal will not pay for this type of counseling with no parental consent. Just take out the not. Then you have Medi-Cal for that. What they're doing really is this. They've gone into an old family code, 1979, 44 years ago, and this code is the one that says children may consent on their own without parental notice to receiving two things: mental health treatment, counseling in outpatient, and to residential shelter. Kids may self-consent and put themselves into residential shelter, but only if certain guardrails exist, and that is danger. Danger to the child. And that's a reason, if you're gonna disrupt a parent's custody and control of their child, you better have a darn good reason, and that reason is danger. Danger to self or others. The child is suicidal, the child is threatening harm to someone else, or danger to that child at home, abuse or incest. That's the code that says, look guys, this is serious, that's very dangerous. In that instance, you gotta let this kid consult, you gotta let the kid consent without parental notice, because they gotta get that help. That's Family Code 6924. And Medi-Cal pays for that. Medi-Cal pays for that counseling, and Medi-Cal pays for that residential shelter. Okay? Jump with me to another code. 10 years later, they created a different code section. And that's the code section that says, oh, by the way, kids can consent to counseling only, and they can do that without parental notice. These are the two dueling codes, right? This one, at the same time they enacted it, they also said, by the way, Medi-Cal's not paying for that. Who knows why? Democrats did it. They did it themselves. Right now, they're saying, well, that's not fair that rich kids, private pay kids get this counseling. So they've gone into the family code, the one that pays with Medi-Cal, and they've stripped out all of those guardrails. And so what they are trying to do is create a statute that says kids 12 and older can consent to mental health counseling and residential shelter with no parental notice. And so what does that look like? That's the kid who's had to fight with parents on the weekend. Parents say, I'm gonna take away your phone, you are grounded, blah, blah, blah. This is not an LGBT issue that they make it out to be. This is a parent-child issue. And you go to the counselor goes, wow, you seem really upset. Yeah, my dad is such a jerk, and I don't want to even go home, I'm afraid to go home. Hey, you wanna go cool off for the weekend at the, the landing spot, the shelter down the street? The kid goes, yeah, I want to take my phone and, whatever. Okay, here you go. And that child leaves school, checks him or herself into the